Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Summer Selections panel. My name is Portia Kapraun. I'm a solutions specialist at LibraryIQ, and I'm also a volunteer fiction reviewer for Library Journal. I'll be moderating this session and on summer selections. And I just want to say these books are not just beach reads, they're stay up late to get in one more chapter reads and sit around a nice campfire gushing to your friends' reads. So all the fun summer reading things. So I am so excited to welcome today, first up, Porochista Khakpour, the critically acclaimed author of two novels, a memoir, and a collection of essays. Her new book, Tehrangeles, is a tragicomic saga about high-functioning family dysfunction and the ever-present struggle to accept one's true self. It is out June 11th. Next up, Clare Lombardo, author of The Most Fun We Ever Had, which has been optioned for television by Reese Witherspoon. Her new novel, Same as It Ever Was, traverses the rocky terrain of real life, exploring new avenues of maternal ambivalence, intergenerational friendship, and the happenstantial cause and effect that governs us all, out June 18th. Riss M. Neilson, she has written two YA novels, including New England Book Award finalist Deep in Providence, her adult debut, A Love Like the Sun, where lifelong best friends spend a fateful summer discovering what might happen if they want to be something more. It'll be out June 11th. Miss Clare Pooley is joining us from London. Hello. Her debut novel, The Authenticity Project, has been translated into 29 languages, and her latest, How to Age Disgracefully, an ensemble comedy in which a senior citizen center and a daycare collide with hilarious results, comes out June 11th. And finally, Beatriz Williams, internationally best-selling author of 19 novels, including my personal favorite, Our Woman in Moscow. Her new novel, Husbands and Lovers, draws readers on an unforgettable journey of heartbreak and redemption from the revolutionary fires of mid-century Egypt to the moneyed beaches of contemporary New England. It comes out June 25th. All right. Are we ready, ladies? All right. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. We are going to start with a question for Clare Pooley and Porochista. Now, you both wrote about a group of characters finding themselves, but at very different stages of their lives, teens for Porochista and older adults for Clare. What was it about these particular age groups that appealed to you? Clare, you'll go first.
Oh, well, I'm now 55, and you know what? I still feel exactly the same as I did when I was about 20 or 30 inside. I mean, I look very different. And I expect that when I'm in my 70s, I will still feel the same again. And I started getting really fed up with reading books which had characters in their 70s and 80s who all felt very stereotypical. You know, they were all sort of sad, lonely technophobes who were saved by the attentions of a younger person. And I sort of wanted to turn that on its head, and I wanted to write about older characters who were really bossing it, you know, who were taking, you know, clutching at life with both hands, and who were actually helping younger people navigate their way through the world rather than vice versa. So yeah, so that's why I chose that age group, and I had great fun with it.
I love it. Porochista?
Well, I really have no interest in teenagers at all. I don't have children of my own. I've been a professor of young people for many years, but I was basically, Tehrangeles is basically like a period piece, but the period is 2020. And so in order to write about that period realistically, I needed to find sort of a generation to focus on. And I've just been, like many people, very inspired by Gen Z. And so most of the characters, the leads are Gen Z. There's one on the cusp of millennial, and then there's the parents who are older than me. But this is the first book I've written where nobody is my age at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was kind of an interesting challenge. And I really wanted to write about teenage girls without condescension. I wanted them to be like as fully monstrous as they can be. And I didn't want to write something that was good for young people necessarily. I just wanted it to be more realistic for who they are. So I spent a lot of time on TikTok and a lot of research on social media to get it right.
Excellent. Yeah. And yeah, probably very different research areas for the two of you also. Next question is for Ritz. One of your main characters gets diagnosed with a chronic illness during the course of her story. Main characters with a health concern are becoming more common, such as Eva in Tia Williams' 7 Days in June. Why was it important for you to include this aspect of your story?
Okay, so first I didn't set out with the intention to even write about Lanaya. She's my main character, but I was supposed to be writing another book. I was on contract for another book in my way contract, and I had just been diagnosed with chronic kidney disease, and it really like changed my life. And I basically wrote this book as kind of a therapy to myself, especially because of the very real thing that Lanaya goes through, where now how do you navigate the world of dating and love? So I felt like that was very important to include in her story. I love books by Tia and Talia, and just you know, I personally like feel a connection to them, but I hadn't read a book yet that like with the diagnosis and what that can do and how that can like change your view on love and relationships. So when I was writing it, it just felt really natural. I wrote it and then it sold, and then I was like, oh, so now it feels like my basically dating diaries is going to be out in the world. Yeah. But I hope you know, anyone that needs it can find it. So
yeah, yeah, I really really enjoyed that. All right, next up, Beatriz and Clare L. You both have dual timelines woven together, Beatriz across generations, and yours is more within one woman's adulthood. What are the joys and difficulties of storytelling in this particular way? Beatriz first. You're muted, Beatriz.
So I try not to disturb anyone else's talk. No, all of my books have really had that interplay between past and present. I am someone who is kind of at home in history, kind of a history native. I feel less comfortable almost in the present day. So for me, that interplay between past and present and the things that happen either to us in the past or to our grandparents or our parents in the past shape who we are. It's just, you know, it's in our bones, it's in our DNA. So I can't imagine really writing in any other way. That's just the way I look at the universe, is that interaction between past and present, and bringing that to life on the page.
Clare?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that on a smaller scale. I've done this in both of my novels. I'm very interested in that interplay as well, but within sort of the confines of a lifetime. And so I think having the past and the present is both its own sort of blessing and curse, because there's really no limit on how deeply into someone's past you can go and how deeply you can get to know a character. And so for me, yeah, this Same as It Ever Was is very much a novel about understanding where the main character has come from, and that, you know, for me, as someone with a background in social work and psychology, you look at their childhood, you look at sort of different phases of their life, and, you know, try to figure out how they came to be. So
Yeah, great. I did want to point out really quick for our audience, I see that the chat is getting some activity. If you have questions specifically for the authors, we may have time to get to those at the end, so please put those into the Q&A, not into the chat, because I can't follow all of that at once. All right, back to our authors. Porochista, Tehrangeles is a neighborhood in LA, which I've never been to either, so I learned a little bit, just learning about the title of your book even. It's obviously a portmanteau of Tehran and Los Angeles. Do you feel like, I kind of felt like the neighborhood was another character in the story. Was that correct interpretation? And could you see telling this story anywhere else?
No, I was actually really surprised that there hadn't been a story of Tehrangeles by any Iranian American writers. And I kind of knew that it would probably have to be me, because I am known for writing about pop culture and satire. And I don't think there is any way to write about that neighborhood without satire. I mean, most people actually have been there without knowing it. It's Beverly Hills, it's Bel Air, it's Brentwood, it's Westwood. It's the west side of LA that unfortunately people focus on. I'm from the east side of LA. I'm not from Tehrangeles at all, but we would frequent it. You know, I grew up in a lower income circumstances, and we'd go over there for like to at Persian food, you know. And then years later, I was a shop girl on Rodeo Drive, which was very eye-opening. And I was extremely mistreated by Iranian Americans in that neighborhood. So I became fascinated by this area of extremely affluent Iranian Americans. I mean, Western women, especially white women in general, seem to be very fascinated by this group as the face of Iranian Americans, whereas when they think of Iran, there's a lot of like trauma porn associated with it, of course. So I just wanted to tell the story of this area and have a family that's kind of representative of it, with satire, but also hopefully with some heart as well.
Awesome. I have to say, yeah, having not had the experience of affluence or living in LA, or being a teenager in 2020, I still felt like your characters and you know were very relatable, and I feel like you pulled that through the story. Okay, Clare Pooley, you're up next. I'm gonna warn you. All right. You you have an entire cast of very fun and should I say quirky characters. Do you have one that you identified with the most? And feel free to talk a little bit about your characters in your answer.
Yeah, I love an ensemble cast, and I particularly like writing multi-generational characters. So the characters in How to Age Disgracefully range from a single father who's just 18 and still at high school, and right the way through to a 75-year-old, and sort of, you know, and everything in between. And I love exploring how the relationships between those different generations and how they view each other. So that was great fun for me. I mean, in terms of the one that, I'm glad you didn't ask me which character I like the most, because I always feel that's like choosing between your favorite child, you know. But the one I identify with most, I guess, has to be Lydia, because she's the closest to my age. So she's a sort of menopausal empty nester. You know, her daughters have both gone off to university, and she's feeling sort of a bit surplus to requirements. And you know, I think it's a tough age, you know, the age that I'm at now, because you have you know, teenagers, and you often have aged parents, and you know, she has a terribly bad husband who is you know, up to all sorts of no good, very different from my own saintly husband, obviously. And yeah, so she's the one that's closest to me, but she's much more timid than I am, and the other characters are probably much naughtier than I am. I mean, there's a kleptomaniac, there's a woman whose five husbands have died in mysterious circumstances. You know, there's another woman with a very dangerous and secretive past. So yeah, so they're much naughtier than I am. So yes, I think Lydia is the most like me in terms of life stage, but not necessarily in terms of attitude.
Yeah, I should point out, Claire's much like Porochista, Claire's characters all sound very wacky, but I think they each have that kernel of humanity that that we can all identify with. So I think that's even maybe not the kleptomania, but we'll see. All right. Next up, we've got another double question for Riss and Porochista. Porochista, I feel like you're getting picked on a little bit. I apologize for for the order. Riss, so you'll go first, Riss. You both weave a story that blends the characters' parents' relationships and how that affects their grown or growing children. Riss, Julia's parents' relationship was I've put the wrong character name in there.
Lanaya, it's okay.
Sorry. I was like, no, Julia, that's Claire.
It's okay.
I
It's a lot for you
apologize.
to remember over there.
Yeah, so Naya's parents' relationship was beautiful and loving, and she really strove to find a love like that. I felt like she, kind of put that love on a bit of a pedestal, whereas Porochista, the Milani parents, existed almost in complete isolation from one another in a way that I felt like confused and frustrated their daughters. Why was it important for both of you to have this intergenerational understanding of family and relationships?
I think one, I always, not to be a super self-insert author, but it just like feels like it comes pretty natural because I always think about the ways in which like my childhood has informed the way that I see love. I want to be loved or not be loved in those ways. So I think for Lanaya, the big thing for her was just being scared to like love that deeply the way that her parents did, even though she puts that love on a pedestal because it can hurt, and yeah, I don't know if I fully answered the question, but I always I always kind of view my characters as some kind of like extension of myself, even though I tried to make them very different afterwards. And I'm just like, how do I want to be loved? And I kind of think of it as terms of like what I've seen growing up, right? In ways I'm like, I don't want to be loved like that. I want to be loved like this. So yeah.
Right. I think you got to the gist of the question. It was kind of lengthy. Porchista?
Well, I read a lot about Iranian American families in general, and I think you've got a diaspora that's basically 40 years old. I mean, I was born in 1978 and the revolution happened in 1979. So a lot of how Iranians have dealt with the West and the West has dealt with them has a lot to do with when they came to the US. So you could have an Iranian that came around my time, in the early 80s, who seems a lot less Iranian than someone who came in the 90s, It doesn't really matter what age they are. It doesn't really matter anything about their circumstances, but it just has a lot to do with like geopolitical tensions and what's going on in the US and the wars we fight abroad and all that. So there's definitely this like political tension in the background, but I really was fascinated with telling the story of like a sort of Iranian American family that was very different than mine, but that still was dealing with a lot of the issues. You can be as rich as you want in LA, but you'll still be subject to the same racism and xenophobia as anyone. There is no level you could get to that you'd be, safe from all that. So they still deal with all that, but they constantly talk about how, well, they have money, so that can fix it. And then obviously, of course, they can't really. So yeah.
Yeah, money doesn't quite fix everything. Yeah, thank you. The parents' relationship was very I think very affected by that. Beatriz, you've been silent for too long. So this novel features more prominently contemporary characters right today, and of course interwoven with more of the rich history that you're known for. What made you kind of jump right into current 21st century, and how is this how is this process a little different?
Well, I have had a couple of books where I have dabbled more in contemporary settings, but this definitely is the first book where a contemporary setting has taken, I guess, the center stage. And, it's not as if, I mean, obviously I do consider myself very much a history native, as I said, but really, honestly, it's not so much from the perspective of a historian. I'm not as interested in big historical events or historical figures. And what I really am, I think, is more of I was an anthropology major in college, so I kind of bring that perspective. I'm more of a historical anthropologist, and what's always interested me is people and their relationship to their times, their relationship to the people around them. And when I came across this story idea, which had to be in a modern setting because there's a DNA element to it. There's a medical element to it that meant that I couldn't really translate that into a historical setting. It was very natural to me. And what I did was I took a setting that I had described in historical terms, sort of mid-century, my island in Long Island Sound that is loosely inspired by the real life Fisher's Island. And I took that. I was always really fascinated by, again, that anthropological aspect of exploring this culture. And then it was in the mid-century in my earlier books, Summer Wives and The Beach at Summerley. So I thought, well, I'll just update that setting to the modern day. Where are these families today, having, lived through this second half of the 20th century? So, I was taking that element of the past that I had already explored before and updating it to a modern setting. And, it was new for me. It was a new voice, but it came very naturally. I do live in the modern day. So, and I do have four teenagers. So I'm certainly, I at least have one little ear to modern cultural references. So I navigated my way through that pretty well and really enjoyed that sense of, and interlaying, laying in that historical element of the story of this main character's grandparents and how they ended up, how she ended up on Winthrop Island. So really, it was just an extension of what I've always been doing in my books.
Wonderful. Yeah. I feel like now is a good time to point out, while I was reading your book, there was some stories on the internet about AI misrepresenting death cap mushrooms as edible. And
my gosh.
for those of you, yeah.
So I'm not a big mushroom fan, and the sort of the plot point in the very end, this is not a spoiler because it's in the first chapter, but this single mother's child ingests a death cap mushroom and goes into kidney failure, and so I've never been a mushroom fan, so I'm always a little bit aware of mushroom stories and justifying my own dislike of mushrooms. And there is a big death cap mushroom murder mystery going on in Australia right now to do with a beef Wellington, which I think is a detail I wish I could have put in my own book. The beef Wellington kind of makes it that much more interesting.
It would have been a slightly different book.
I know. It's like, darn it, I should have made this a murder mystery with a beef Wellington. Oh my gosh, I missed a trick there.
I love when you're reading a book and then something in the real world reflects it and you're like, wait a minute. Clare Lombardo, Julia. This really is Julia. I got the name right this time. She's living in the suburbs and she's not really the typical kind of bored housewife that we often think of, like, she's got too much time on her hands to spend at Lululemon or something. And but she's more a woman who never, I felt like, quite feels like she's experienced life really as she should. And late in the novel, she admits to her son that she feels like she wasn't really what he needed. What do you think was her motivation? I'm being kind of vague here because I want to let you talk a little bit about Julia, but what do you think was her motivation for her actions? And was she making bad decisions to punish herself? Was she just not thinking what was going on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've described this character a few times as a person who has a really hard time being a person. Julia is someone who has always found it more difficult to navigate the world than some of the rest of us, not all of the rest of us. We all have our struggles. But she is someone who, to paraphrase what you said, she's never quite felt at home in the world. She moves through it not super easily. And so this book is very much an exploration of her psyche and her neuroses, of which there are many. She's a difficult character. She is a character who struggles internally a lot, and also struggles to interact with the world around her. And so a lot of what the present arc of this book is about is sort of her reckoning with her past, particularly her days of young motherhood, when she kind of is very unmoored and having a very hard time, and meets this sort of magnetic, magical older woman who makes everything look and feel quite a bit easier than it actually is. So that was fun for me to explore, and to sort of go back to your question on dual timelines. That was something that was really enjoyable for me as a writer, to kind of volley back and forth between what does it look like for her to be a relatively contented, 57-year-old woman in the suburbs, whose life is ostensibly and actually going pretty well, and to contrast that with what did it look like when things weren't going that well. And so I think a lot of the book is Julia sort of working through, could I have done better? Should I have done more? Did my kids turn out okay regardless? So I'm interested in those kind of big questions, and so is Julia by extension.
Great. All right, this is for both of the Clares. We'll start with Clare Pooley. We'll give you a second to catch your breath, Clare Lombardo. So Clares, you both have female main characters, and this kind of relates back, acting against, I would say, against expectations in both Julia and Daphne. What is it about women behaving badly that is so appealing to readers and to you as writers? This is really a Portia's like reading therapy question. Like, why do I love these women so much?
I think badly behaved women are sort of aspirational. I think there's something really wonderful about not conforming to expectations and not caring about what people think of you. I think there's something really freeing in that. And I think as you get older, that becomes more and more easy. I think as younger women, we feel this real pressure to conform and be who people expect us to be. And it's great being able to throw the shackles of that off. So yeah, I love badly behaved women. One of my favorite poems is Jenny Joseph's When I'm Old, I Shall Wear Purple. And I had that very much in mind when I wrote Daphne's character.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I think I like looking at badly behaved women as aspirational. They're often quite relatable too, I think. There's varying degrees of bad behavior, certainly. But I think bad behavior is also often born out of necessity, or out of, it's a product of how society has treated women. And so I think readers relate to it. I certainly related to it. I certainly often have not made maybe the decisions that I should have, quote unquote. And I'm also annoyed as a reader by characters who are too nice or perfect, or the more a writer tells me that a character that I should like them, the more disinclined I am to like them. So I certainly as a writer and a reader, I'm drawn to women who are more complicated and flawed. So I derive a lot of enjoyment from that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I think that could have been a question also for Porochista. Like her girls are and all over the place. If you have anything to chime in, no. She's smiling, so okay. We are getting toward the end of the prepared questions, so please make sure you put your questions in the Q&A if you have any for these wonderful authors. Riss and Beatriz, you both have friends to lovers storyline interwoven into your story with a longer waiting period, a few years for Mallory and Monk Beatriz, and decades for Lanaya and Isaac. Why so I guess this is another one of those, like, what is it? Why choose that instead of like a love at first sight? What makes it that story, I guess, what makes it more appealing, or why did you choose that particular approach? Risk, you first.
First I want to say, just as a reader, friends to lovers is probably my favorite trope. So I think I chose this because, and why I love this trope is because of the shared history, obviously, like growing together and like seeing many versions of yourself in them. And something about that just feels, and I want to say I'm cheating a little bit as an author, but it feels a little bit I like to, I don't know, I like to bring out the emotions, and like I love, my favorite thing is when everyone's like, your books made me cry or whatever. So this, it's cheating a little bit just to say that like there's something a little easier about knowing someone deeply and them knowing you, and being able to bring that onto the page and then turn it into romantic love. And I think there's also other things like the tension of, is he looking at me like this, or is he looking at me like he's always looked at me? There's that. And then being vulnerable to be able to say I love you in this romantic way, and know that it can potentially like mess up the friendship. I think in romance landia, there's like the thing where it's like, well, just do it already, like who can, but for me, I'm like, I mean, in real life, um and in my character story, it's a big thing to decide to like romantically love each other, knowing that that changes the dynamic of the relationship and could potentially lead to it ending. So I don't know, I just love it, so much tension there. Yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, me too. So I told you this is like Portia's reading therapy session. I feel like so. Beatrice, so you with Mallory and Monk, they met in high school, and then kind of took a few years to build that up. What, I guess, yeah, same question.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I'm just thinking that, in fact, I I grew up in a world of opera, and my parents would, and that's very much love at first sight. That is very much like they don't even exchange words and they're in love. So that was kind of my sort of background growing up. So friends to lovers to me, I think to me, it's partly a response to having a more contemporary setting in this case. So and you have two characters, Monk and Mallory, who are very different. A lot of the class tension and cultural tension that takes place in my earlier book set on Winthrop, it's still there, and it's shifted around a bit. But Mallory is she's Catholic. She comes from more of a working class background. Monk comes from very much one of the old families, the summer families on Winthrop Island. Monk is this incredibly charismatic, person. He's electric. He's someone that I personally fell in love with as I was writing him, which is always a dangerous thing as a writer. But it seemed very natural to me that they would start out as friends, that he would be someone she would connect with as a person, but feel as if, well, there's too much between us in terms of our backgrounds, in terms of, our aspirations in life. And so it made sense to me that they were able to connect on other levels and see each other as human beings first, before realizing that at the same time they had both had these feelings for each other. So I loved exploring that. I thought it really made sense in a contemporary setting, but I also got to add in my personal favorite romance trope, which is lovers reunited. So, things go wrong, and then they meet each other many years later. And is that friendship still there? Is that connection that they had earlier, and is that what is going to bring them back together again, or not? I mean, is that friendship enough? Was that enough to create enough of a bond between them that they're going to have a basis to form a relationship when they meet later? So that was what I really wanted to explore, and to bring in all the the cultural, and some of that, because one of the great things about writing about these sort of older East Coast families is everything is kind of under the surface. It's all unspoken. But how does the old money family circa 2022 relate to the old money families that I created in the 1950s? So, having that sense of difference and having that friendship be the basis for their relationship, to me was a really neat thing to explore, something that I had not really done before. And I really you know, I really enjoyed that multi-layered relationship building that took place.
Yeah, I feel like you both did a really good job of making them seem very believable and very relatable. So thank you. All right, we have time for the lightning round, and actually we're doing really well on time, so this can be slightly less fast lightning if we want to. And so what this is just thinking about what do you want readers to take with them when they finish your novel. I felt like every time I finished one of your books, which I've read them all in the last couple of weeks. So I've had a lot of emotions, so and thoughts and feelings, and so I thought this would just be a good time for you guys to just kind of go through and talk about what you were hoping the readers would walk away with. And we are going to start with Porochista. First, you have to show off your cool mug that everybody's been complimenting in the chat, though. Yeah, excellent.
It's hard to say what I was hoping. I just think I really wanted readers to have fun with this. I've written some books that are definitely not fun, you know, sort of harrowing tales of chronic illness and disability and stuff like that. And I just really wanted a book that could be a fun read, because so often I think people hear Iran or even Muslim culture and they think very dire, tragic, upsetting things. Like I said, there's a lot of trauma porn that comes out of my part of the world. So I wanted something that really countered that. And I don't really believe in guilty pleasures, but I sort of wanted that feeling that it could feel kind of indulgent and just fun. I think we are in a time where fun is hard to come by. So that was a goal of mine.
So, yeah, I would say as much as the family goes through, your characters are so fun, and you know, a lot of laughter, and what's with these kids these days? All right, Claire Lombardo, you're up next.
That's a good question. You know, I guess I felt similarly about my first book. The takeaway I would like, a takeaway I would like for readers to have from this book, you may not like or relate to the characters in my novels at all times, and you may not approve of the decisions that they make, but it is my hope that readers will walk away from this book with an increased sense of empathy, I guess, or with perhaps the inclination to I don't know, think about where people that bother you are coming from, or to think about, you know, why we make the decisions that we do. I struggled with Julia, my narrator character in this novel, quite a bit writing her. She was a difficult person to spend, you know, like 5 years with, because she doesn't always do, she very infrequently does what she's, you know, supposed to do. And she self-sabotages, and she hurts the people around her, sometimes deliberately. She can be sort of difficult to stomach. But I really grew to love her and enjoy spending time with her. So it is my hope that and I recognize parts of myself, you know, for better or for worse, in this character. So it is my hope that readers will have the same experience, and maybe see some of their own experience in the story of these people. Yeah.
Next up is Riz.
I don't know if this is gonna be weird, but I was gonna just read my dedication, because I feel like my dedication kind of like, and also I am not like a therapist, and I'm not saying like my book is gonna be therapy to anyone at all ever. But I hope like if anyone needs anything from it, they will maybe take this. Says for anyone who has ever felt hard to love, to anyone who has ever been afraid to ask for what they need, and for myself, it's not easy being brave, but I believe in us. So yeah, just basically especially like being willing and being vulnerable enough to like ask what you need. ask for what you need and ask for what you want, I think. I'm not sure how much escapism is in my novel, but it was fun to write, so I hope it's fun to read too. And that's all I have.
It is fun. It is fun. I
It
will
is?
vouch for it.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I'll vouch for you. Speaking of fun, Clare Pooley, what what would you like people to take away when they finish your book?
Oh, I sort of feel like we're all going through such a hard time right now in the world. And, you know, my books are often described as feel-good fiction. I hope that people come away from them feeling better about the world and better about other people, and that they see the power of community and of sort of reaching out to strangers. But in addition to that, I really hope that people will choose never to look at the same way at a septuagenarian again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think yeah, you're thinking about all these lives that people are living that look so innocent on the street, right? All right. And finally, Beatrice.
Yeah, so you know, I always like to have my books kind of work on a couple of levels. And the first level in this book is obviously there's this wonderful, exciting, very electric love story at the heart of the book. But there are kind of two love stories there. We haven't talked much about what happens in the past, in mid-century to Mallory's grandparents. And that also is a love story, definitely more of a love at first sight. So there is that sort of, you know, there's these two love stories working together and in contrast as well. So I think that gives, you know, that dimension to it. And it's also really about, aside from the power of a love story and the power of motherhood, these are both mothers and the sacrifices they're willing to make for their children. But also a sense of, I guess, the resilience of women. I think women in particular, we go through a lot of trauma in our lives. We go through a lot of difficulties, and we have this ability to pick ourselves up and go on because we have to, because we have no choice. And I think, you know, this book is really beyond that sort of love and motherhood element as well. That just sense of, you know, the power of women, our resilience to pick ourselves up when terrible things happen to us, and move on with our lives and create love again and create a new life. So that's kind of the larger message of the book. But of course, you know, I think the electricity of that love story is certainly what throttled me through writing the last half of the book. It is really, I think, one of the best love stories I've written. So I'm certainly hoping that readers will feel that way as well.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so we have one question in the Q&A so far. I am expecting a flood from our audience now that we've learned a little bit more. So first up, Clare Lombardo, your quote is from a Talking Heads song. Could you tell us how? So was that intentional?
It was, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I have had the experience with exclusively men who come up to me and say, do you realize that the title of your book comes from a Talking Heads song? And I'm like, no, I've never heard that in my life. Yes, it is from a Talking Heads song. I got through college and graduate school exclusively titling my papers after song lyrics. It was a challenge I set for myself. And so I had a song lyric from a Bee Gees song that was the original title of this novel, but nobody could remember it. And I was the only person in the world who liked it, which was devastating for me. But so my editor and I were sort of going back and forth for weeks trying to figure out a new title for this book. And Julia, the main character, and her husband, Mark, music, particularly live music, is a big part of their shared history. And it's also kind of how the reader can sort of orient themselves in time throughout the book based on sort of what Julia is listening to. And my editor called me one morning and just said, should we pick the most obvious song in the world about waking up in a life and not you know, not being able to believe that it's your life. And so we did, and I'm very fond of it. It took me, I was sad to relinquish my original title, but yeah, music is a very big part of my life and my writing process, and it's a big part of the lives of these characters. And I do think it jibes well with, you know, this woman who, again, is living in ostensibly happy circumstance and can't really believe it. So it felt quite fitting to me.
Yeah, you have a great soundtrack.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. All right. I don't see any other Q&As, so I'm just gonna jump off of that and ask, does anybody else, you can show us, oh yes, Riff, we need to see your cat, who is so well behaved. Oh,
This is Aries. She's,
Aries.
yeah. She loves, anytime I'm on a Zoom, she's right there. Oh, thank you so much. Oh, look, I put her down on the floor and now she's like, was you trying to get me off your bed? That was an accident. Sorry, Aries.
All right.
Thank you so much.
So thank you. If everybody wants to hold up your books, if you have a copy there, it seemed like most of them. Oh, and now Claire, they want to know what the Bee Gees song was too. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, the Bee Gees song is How Deep Is Your Love? It was originally called World of Fools, and I can say that now because part 3 of the novel is called World of Fools. So yeah, maybe for book 3 I can use the Bee Gees.
Yeah. I think we all know the song, so
You do, yeah.
yeah. If anybody else has a song lyric they've always wanted to name a book after, you can share that, but I don't want to you know, ruin your next novel. So all right, think I think we are all set. I'm gonna come back on. I apologize for my goofy internet. Beatriz is the one out in the out in the rural area, and I'm the one with the internet acting up. That is everything that we have prepared. We have 1 minute left. I think everybody is very excited now to read all of these books, but you do have to wait until June. But it's your June is like packed now, so I'm preparing you. So thank you very much to all of the authors who joined us today and to all of the participants that came on. Next up, we have 2 concurrent panels, Faces of Mental Health and Your Next Group Read. Thank you very much again, and authors, you deserve a nice cup of tea and a nap. Thank you. Bye-bye.